Hello and welcome to Present Parenting, where our mission is to give children the mindful care they need. My name is Amy, and today I'm going to introduce the accountability stage, the third of 6 stages on the accountability pyramid. This video gives just a brief overview. To really understand present parenting, follow along on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, where I will continue to share all of my content for free. You can also join a live Q&A or participate in a Marco Polo Sharecast, where you can ask questions privately and listen to my thoughts and answers at your leisure. As I continue to create content, I will also post it on my website at www.presentparenting.org. Before I get started, I want to point out the obvious. The accountability stage shares its name with the accountability pyramid, but the accountability stage is not the first fundamental stage on the pyramid. Rather, the accountability stage is in the middle of the pyramid, meaning that children are not ready for the accountability stage until after years and years of first experiencing the attachment and following stages. I hope this video helps you understand why teaching kids about real accountability is not at the beginning or end of child development. It is in the middle. Let's start the accountability stage where I always like to start, brain science. Do you remember in my beginner's overview video where I describe how the brain develops back to front and from the inside out? Well, after years of turbulent activity in the emotional circuits that are deep inside the middle of the brain, there's an interesting layer of brain tissue above the emotional circuits that is key in the next step of brain development. It's called the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC, and it sits between the primitive emotional circuits and the up-and-coming mindful prefrontal cortex. The ACC's job includes conscious detection of truth versus error and conscious calculation of cost versus benefit. ACC growth increases general self-awareness and an understanding of how the world works. For example, with this new awareness, the ACC helps detect when a behavior is perceived by others as socially awkward, and therefore helps promote more socially appropriate behaviors like putting pants on before leaving the house or not throwing a tantrum for the whole store to hear. The ACC also helps us to pay attention when we've made an error, like on a math problem. And thus it helps us improve our attention span to keep learning a new concept until we know we've gotten it right. Essentially, prior to age 7 or 8, the brain is quite impulsive, innocent, oblivious about the future, and only concerned about self-preservation in the here and now because the ACC only has connections to the primitive brain that sits underneath it in order to solve the problems it detects. But after age 7 or 8, the ACC begins to connect with the outer frontal lobe, which allows kids' brains to not only comprehend cause and effect, but also to use skills like reflection and planning and empathy to make more mindful decisions. So with this increased brain capacity comes a new window of opportunity. After 7 or 8 years of carrying the weight of accountability for our children's behaviors, it is now time to add the accountability mindset to our parenting toolbox and offer them the opportunity to carry the weight of their own accountability. To manage discipline during the accountability stage, a parent will use the accountability mindset, which is this: while maintaining awareness, begin to give the child some freedom to set their own limits and then grant them the time and space to notice and feel the results of their behaviors and choices. Regularly lead the child in honest, open-minded reflection regarding options, choices, and natural consequences. The focus is on mentoring and motivating the child with a vision that healthy, mindful choices can help them to enjoy life now and prepare them for a successful future. Consider this analogy. When a young child goes bowling, it makes sense to put the bumpers up so the child can victoriously roll the bowling ball down the long lane and hit pins regardless of how great their motor skills are at aiming straight down the middle to avoid the gutters. The bumpers, like parents during the attachment and following stages, bear the burden of the fact that the child's brain lacks the connections that would otherwise help the child experience success. Now consider a bowler who can throw a strike or a spare with ease, all without bumpers. After sufficient training and practice, this bowler might not throw a strike every time, but they have the brain connections capable of calculating relatively consistent body movements that can knock pins down and with very few gutter balls. Just like the self-discipline and independent stages, the bowler doesn't need bumpers, aka parents, to buffer their lack of experience or mask their mistakes. But how does an inexperienced bumpers required bowler become an experienced strike throwing bowler? Does it happen overnight? Of course not. At some point when the bowler is ready, the bumpers have to come down so the bowler can experience real gutter balls. Why? Because as a dedicated bowler experiences the pain of gutter balls, it is only then that their ACC can detect the failed attempt and start inspiring brain connections to correct it. Then, after many, many gutter balls that have worked together to increase bodily awareness bit by bit, the bowler skills become refined. This intermediate or middle phase of learning between bumpers and bowling champ is the accountability stage. It's a time when the brain craves reality and is also capable of using that reality, whether it's truth or error, failure or success, to turn practice into progress little by little. In child development, there is a time and a season for bumpers. There's also a time and a season for taking the bumpers down and knowing how to wisely support our kids as they hit a few pins here and there and throw a lot of gutter balls. And there's a time and a season to step back more completely and let them discover for themselves how to succeed or fail all on their own. All so that they, not us, can decide in which ways they will lead society when they become adults. And remember, some of the best learning comes through natural consequences. While your child does need pointers on how to become a better bowler, pointing out what they did wrong after every gutter ball won't help. Make sure your child sees you as their cheerleader as much as their coach. So I hope you see how the preteen years of the accountability stage are a very important stepping stone between the innocence of young childhood and the emerging independence of adolescence. How we shift our disciplinary mindset during these years is critical to our child's long-term prefrontal cortex development. Now keep in mind, as we add the accountability mindset to our disciplinary repertoire, it does not replace previous mindsets, but instead adds to them. You'll still see many opportunities to continue using the attachment and following mindsets. But now, after many years of discipline that focused on increasing your natural connection with your child and modeling maturity and positive leadership for your child's brain is ripe for true accountability. Let them experience real-life decision-making and the consequences that come naturally. It will likely feel a little unnerving to take the bumpers down and let go of setting all the limits that were really important to have complete control of before. So start small, but start somewhere. I'll give some examples shortly, but remember this key takeaway. Ages 7 to 12 are critical and often relatively calm transition years that you should take advantage of before puberty hits. Since pre-puberty kids can still be relatively immature and easy to control compared to teens, you'll likely be tempted to micromanage them. But your child needs your gradual and mindful letting go during the accountability stage to enable healthy brain development and preparation for self-discipline and independence during the teenage years. So you might be thinking, but wait a second, aren't kids capable of being accountable way before age 7? Kids younger than 7 do responsible things all the time. Yes, you're absolutely right. Young children do have glimpses of accountability all the time. For example, when they decide on their own to be nice to a sibling, or to clean up their toys, or learn how to get dressed on their own, or follow your directions. But there's an important distinction to make that might be helpful. Let's consider the difference between momentary or primitive accountability versus true or mindful accountability. Since young children don't have very consistent use of their prefrontal cortex, it's very likely that those cute, responsible, independent decisions are dominantly made with their primitive brains that are simply reacting to the environment or copying the mood of the moment. This kind of accountability, though blissful and cute, is momentary and fleeting. And it often deceives us parents into thinking that our kids should always be able to be accountable for picking up their toys because they did it yesterday or last week. But trust me, a 2 or a 3 or a 5-year-old is still years away from taking consistent accountability of their own free conscious will. Don't mistake those moments for true mindful accountability yet, or fall into the trap of reverting to rewards and punishments to manipulate them into always being that accountable all on their own. Instead, enjoy those precious moments of accountability in your young children, but wait until 7 or 8 to have serious conversations about true accountability that extends well beyond the current moment and comes from within. So how do I know if my child is ready for the accountability stage? During the transition between the attachment and following stages, there's not a huge need to watch for signs of readiness because babies are born to crave both the attachment mindset and in a short time, the following mindset. With the accountability mindset, however, we need to be watching for signs of readiness, so we're not jumping to that stage too soon or missing opportunities to shift accountability to our child's shoulders when their brains are ripe for it. So, what are we looking for? Given that the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC, plays a key role in this stage, you're watching for signs of it doing its job, signs that it's working hard to discern right from wrong and cause and effect, or signs that it's recalling past conflicts and predicting future ones and trying to plan ahead. A few common cues from children include questions about reality. Is the tooth fairy really real? Or perhaps a desire to take control of decision making and a seriousness in accepting the natural consequences that will come with those decisions. For example, I don't want to wear my coat, and yes, I'm okay if I get cold. Or an understanding that time extends beyond a few moments. My birthday isn't for another 3 weeks. Okay. Or a detection of parents' mistakes. Why aren't you wearing a seatbelt? Or realistic worries about how the future is going to go. Is it hard to learn to drive a car? Or the ability to reflect on reality and feel it actually sinking in a little. I don't want cavities, so I will brush my teeth. The list could go on. If you have specific questions about accountability signs, ask in the comments or join one of my Marco Polo groups. Let's review this chart. Remember how during the long attachment and following stages, you were the sole bearer of accountability? Well, notice how the accountability stage is a time when you and your child will work together in handling accountability, sometimes in a joint fashion where both of you are simultaneously involved, like both feeling responsible for being aware of how much TV time happens in a week, or jointly agreeing on which nights are good for staying up late. And then sometimes accountability will occur in a mixed way where either your child will jump in to be in charge of their own self-motivation in a given moment, or you, as a parent, will assist in other moments. For example, let's say you and your child jointly agree that playing one of their favorite games should be limited to just a few hours a week. Perhaps you also jointly agree that your child gets to determine when those hours happen. Then during the week, you both maintain a general awareness of how that limit plays out so you can reflect and discuss together at a later time. But the self-motivation to stick to that goal in the moment might be a mixed effort. Sometimes your child will lead the way in stopping their tech time to transition to a new activity on their own. And sometimes you'll feel a need to step in and to remind them of their goal and give suggestions on what else to transition to. While the safety and well-being of your child is always a high priority in deciding when to step in versus not, remember that the accountability mindset intentionally encourages us to take steps away from micromanaging every limit in their lives so that their ACC can start to discern that the buck really does stop with them. This awareness of real-life responsibility is what will help trigger their growing frontal lobe to begin to consider the long-term effects of good versus bad decisions. But also remember that these pre-puberty kids are still quite young and will need guidance as they work on life skills. They don't want or deserve to be shamed if they struggle to follow through on their goals. So to be present during the accountability stage, we're aware and available, but also thoughtful about when to offer support versus wisely letting them manage themselves. So it's helpful for me to remember that accountability is a team effort during these years. Balancing that team effort is the key between ages 7 and 12. Before moving on, also notice how these preteen years of practicing accountability together are intended to prepare both you and your child for the next big transition that's just around the corner, the teenage years, when your child's brain will be wired to think for itself and in many cases, regardless of what you think. The accountability mindset focuses on counseling with children about goal setting and leading them in reflective decision making, which provides slow, steady, and very necessary prefrontal cortex experience. Encouraging preteens to use their own prefrontal cortex with simple decisions like what time to go to bed, or what to wear, or how much dessert to eat, helps prepare these future teens for the complexities of significantly bigger decisions ahead, like whether or not to drink alcohol, or how to approach sexuality, or how much to study for finals. Ironically, these much more complex decisions will come during the rocky adolescent years when their brain will be wired to separate itself from much of your parental influence. So whether you like it or not, your teen will make those big decisions largely on their own. Thus, having a brain that can recognize natural consequences without a parent's bumper guard is key to safety and success. So start the accountability stage by considering the many limits of daily life and decide which limits are the safest ones for you to let your child begin to take charge of now so they can experience the real natural consequences that go with those choices. Keep an open mind as to which limits are truly necessary for you to maintain accountability for, like ones where you feel your child's safety is at stake if you don't. I personally put certain technology use in this category, versus limits that can be tested without much risk. For us, that includes when to get homework done, or what time to go to bed, or how to care for personal hygiene. And just like professional bowlers need to gain experience by throwing gutter balls, you're not looking for perfect strikes from your 8-year-old when they start to set their own limits. It's okay and even good for your child to make mistakes during the accountability stage, because the growth comes as their ACC notices those mistakes and gains experience in making adjustments. So let them set limits that are safe enough to make mistakes, and let them make mistakes. Then be prepared to be a mindful mentor. Think about how you'd want your mentors to respond when you make a mistake. It's a delicate process, but keep practicing personal mindfulness and you'll be great. In fact, reflect on the mindful endurance that you've needed thus far in order to accomplish the attachment and following stages, and let the brain growth you've experienced assist you in your new role of becoming a mindful mentor. Since the accountability mindset is all about gradually involving your child in decision making, a key aspect of the accountability stage is talking with your child about accountability. Around age 7 or 8, I recommend beginning a simple mentoring pattern with your child that gives them exposure to making important decisions in simple everyday situations. As you commit yourself to giving your child space and time to experience reality, you'll also begin to observe your child's decisions and behaviors over time with an open mind. Taking a few notes on what you observe and inviting your child to take notes from their perspective can help both of you when you meet to reflect together, discuss natural consequences, and agree on future goals. During that meeting, you'll again commit to giving your child space to practice their own decision making. While parents are still very aware of their child's behavior, we shift accountability to their shoulders little by little, managing their daily routines less and less as time goes by. These simple dialogue tips may help you begin to open the door for teaching your child about this shift in accountability. I'll walk through some parts of it, and for others, please pause the video or take a screenshot to read through them more in depth on your own. You might say to your child, "I'm so glad you're excited to learn how to be in charge of yourself. Let's make sure you understand what natural consequences are." Natural consequences happen as a result of choices. We can be in charge of choices, but we can't be in charge of natural consequences because they are linked to natural laws. For example, do you know what gravity is? If we throw a ball up, gravity, not us, is in charge of the ball falling back down. So let's consider the natural laws and consequences of choices you might make. What are the natural consequences of choosing not to brush your teeth? Let your child answer. Yep, you're likely to get cavities or have bad breath. You get the idea. Feel free to screenshot this and study it at your leisure. Besides talking with your child about choices and natural consequences, you'll also need to help your child understand that you'll need to meet with them ongoing about how it's all going. At our house, we hold formal and informal mentor meetings with our child. We typically set formal meetings up once a week or so if that suits our child well. This gives a child a sense of responsibility in sharing their accountability experiences with us, especially in the beginning. And we also find daily opportunities to check in with them as well on an informal basis. Regarding the more formal mentor meetings, this slide and the next offer a few thoughts to consider when talking with your child. Again, feel free to screenshot this and take a moment to pause the video and study it. A final note, I like to warn parents about the woohoo effect. It's when you tell your child that they get to decide their own limits on how much candy to eat or what time to go to bed on a Friday night or how soon to spend all of their spending money. and you promise you won't interfere, and they get a huge smile on their face and quite literally shout for joy in a way that makes you nervous. But no need to fear. This is normal. Of course, your child feels giddy about making their own decisions. Think about it. Can you remember a time when a parent or teacher or a boss gave you a free pass to decide for yourself? It is exciting to be in charge of your own choices. So instead of freaking out, join your child in being excited. It's a big step for them to set their own limits, so genuinely celebrate with them. If you're concerned that your celebrating will signal your support for gutterball type decisions, remember that there will be plenty of opportunities to mentor them on how wise the boundaries they are setting for themselves actually are. For now, though, let them think for themselves and even dream up all sorts of directions they can decide to go, because it is only then that they can start to detect for themselves where those directions might lead them. If you're still nervous, acknowledge your inner fears about the real world risks that are legitimately scary. Take some deep breaths. Of course, you should protect your child from real immediate danger if your instinct is telling you to do so. But remind yourself that in most cases, even if their woohoo does indeed lead to a gutterball result, as you might fear it will, that's the point. Taking the bumpers down at this age and knowing that gutterballs are not only inevitable, but also important, gives you and your child critical practice for the teen years ahead. And on the contrary, waiting to take those bumpers down will only postpone and likely magnify the woohoo effect in later years. So don't delay due to your own nervousness. Trust me when I say that a child who has had years of attachment and following stage experience is ready for and needs the accountability mindset that gives them exciting freedom and grown-up responsibility. Thank you again for your precious time and attention today. I hope you feel inspired to continue on this present parenting journey. Keep learning, keep trying. Together, we can change the world, one child and one present moment at a time.